Alright guys, here we are for part 2 of ICD10 coding. It's your host, Dr. Matt, along with Allison. Alright, we got cut off there in the end because we were just talking way too long about ICD10 because ICD10 is so exciting. So we're going to move on and we're going to go ahead and finish out where we started. So here we are again in our ICD10 selection tool. Again, if you guys will remember, we've got 2 diagnoses that don't have an ICD10 code associated with them, one that's always auto-mapped. We go ahead and select the ICD10 tool and we get in here, and under the ICD9 specific tab we notice, there is no option for right foot pain. Neither is there an elbow sprain. And so we're going to have to dig into the big search tool to go ahead and find the codes that we're looking for. And so you select the search tool button and that's going to bring up a web browser. The first thing you notice is here are the diagnoses. There's the one of 3. To scroll through the diagnoses, you go ahead and hit the little arrow here, and that's going to give you basically the best choice that it is aware of based on its ICD-9 code awareness. You can even scroll to the one that says preventative health counseling, which was auto-mapped, but if you notice, that one already has a selection done and we don't need to worry about it. So we're going to go ahead and scroll back through elbow sprain and go back to foot pain. We're going to start from scratch. So basically the best way to do this is to make sure that your main category is selected here, and then you can use this column to select the location. And so you happen to know that, oh yeah, it was right foot, and it was right, and then it was foot. So we're going to go ahead and see if we can find anything that says foot here. And actually it turns out it does not have foot. Oh, here it is right there. Okay, so it's up top. That's why I brought Allison along, because she can see things like that better than I can. And if you notice, that narrowed down the number of results here all the way from a huge number down to 2. And so basically we can either say the pain's in the right foot if we don't have a specific place for it, or we can get just slightly more specific and say that the pain's in the right toe if you've documented that in the note. Just an aside, it's important that you document it right in the note too for ICD-10, or else you're not able to say that it's in the right foot. But basically we're going to go ahead and select the tool right there, and now that code is selected and we're good to go. So then we want to go ahead and hit this arrow, and we want to go on to the next one. Now elbow sprain comes up again. We have a lot of options available on elbow sprain. So we can go ahead and start by looking over here, and so we can say, is it a muscle injury or is it more of a dislocation or a sprain? Well, this one's more of a sprain, so we're going to select that one right there. And then we're going to go ahead and select what side it's on.
Now, what if I already see mine way over there that I already know I'm going to select on the far right?
If you do that, you can go ahead and skip these steps. This is not mandatory. It's just helpful to help you narrow down when there's so many diagnoses. But if you want to, and you see the one you want, you can actually just go ahead and select it and move on your way. One of the things that I find is helpful is, even if you don't select these, just skim through and take a look at what options are available. Note for a sprain, and especially for any type of injury, be it sprain or fracture, one of the new criteria on this is to document whether it's the initial code or it's a subsequent encounter, or if it's a sequela of that. An initial encounter is going to be the first time that you ever see the patient. So even if they've been seen in the ER for it, or say I see it, but then Allison's going to see it back, she's going to select initial encounter for that, because for her it's the first time she's seeing the patient for it.
It's the provider.
It's provider specific. If it's a subsequent encounter, when Allison sees that patient for follow-up, she's going to select subsequent encounter. If the sprain is healed up, but the patient has chronic pain is related for it, then you're actually going to mark it as a sequela, because the sprain itself is healed, but the patient has a scar or has chronic pain or has a limp that's associated with it. You're going to use sequela as the diagnosis. Sequela comes in handy especially for things like strokes and whatnot. You'll actually mark those as a sequela once the initial stroke period is over, but they have a limp or they have a slur or they have difficulty swallowing as a result of that. But again, we're going to select sprain, and then we can select initial encounter, and boom. Then you've got your choices here, and you can say right, left, or if you forgot to document which side it was on, you can't remember, you can use unspecified. But just like ICD-9, they're trying to discourage the use of unspecified codes if at all possible. And if you choose something unspecified, it's going to increase the chance that payment will get delayed or audited. So I actually don't think we documented that in the note, but we can actually go ahead and select left, and we'll go back and document it under the circumstances if we need to.
Now, my computer, I can't see the next button. I just always jump to review. Is that okay?
That's okay. One of the options you can do if you want to see that next is to go ahead and shrink the screen a little bit. So either minimize it using this button right here, or come down to the bottom and just drag it a little bit closed so you can actually get a good look at it. Can be helpful, because what the next screen brings up is actually a help screen that allows you to know is if there's any codes that usually are documented along with a particular code. So in this case, if the patient had a foreign body, that usually goes along. That is one of the requirements to check to see if it goes along with that. Again, also if there was an open wound or not, they would want to know that under the circumstances. So, if the patient had a foreign body as a result of a sprain, not sure how that would happen, but they would want you to click that Z18. A better example of that would be the diabetes code. If you'll notice, the diabetes will always have the insulin code underneath there that you can select as incident to. And then when you're done, you hit save. And that actually automatically brings up the review tab, which allows you to, again, check to make sure you've got everything. So you got foot pain, pain in right foot, you got elbow sprain, unspecified sprain of left elbow, initiative counter, and then you have preventative health counseling, other specified counseling. Now, say you look at that elbow sprain and say, unspecified. Dr. Matt said don't use unspecified. And the tool took you there, and there really wasn't an additional option for you to go ahead and do that. So one of the things you can do is go back to select codes. You can go back to elbow sprain, and you can use the arrows to navigate to it, but it's already there. And I'm going to start my search from scratch. So I'm going to just type in sprain up top here. Oh, I'm going to type in sprain up here. We're using the wrong keyboard, always an issue. And I'm going to hit enter, and that's going to initiate the search based on just the word sprain. And it may give me some broader options. The tool tries to be helpful in narrowing things down for you, but once in a while it gets just a little bit too narrow. And so here's some additional options. And note, what I'm finding on here is things like sprain of jaw, sprain of joints, and things like that. And so I'm going to come back over here, and tons of stuff over there. So this is where the narrowing down comes in handy. We remember that we had a sprain in the elbow, so we're going to scroll down here and pick elbow. And then we also remember that it was left elbow. Again, you can usually unselect something, and that'll actually bring your other options back. We're going to select left elbow. Now we can talk about the fact, and we can see, well, these talk about sprains, but these are actually more specific than we're able to say. Like these are talking about anterior subluxations, posterior subluxations. It's a little too complicated for what I'm used to talking about. I don't know about you, Allison, but
no, I'm right there.
You're right there sometimes. Absolutely.
Diagnosing elbow sprains left and right.
Yeah.
And subluxation and dislocation.
So again, you can talk about which direction the sprain went to if you want to, but most of the time you're going to come back here and say, well, I think it's just a garden variety sprain, and it's going to be the initial counter. And again, under the circumstances, looks like we're coming back with just the unspecified strain again, and that's likely the one you're going to use. But if you look, you actually have some additional options. So if you know it's the radiocollateral ligament, of course, radial being on the thumb side, you would actually go ahead and pick that one, especially if that's where their pain was, on the lateral aspect there. If it was ulnar, you could pick that one. And if it's the ulnohumeral joint, you could pick that one. So again, here we've got some different options. You still may say unspecified if you haven't documented which specific ligament you think it is, but by starting with the generic sprain rather than relying on their associations given the current code, you've actually made some more options. And so if you get to the point where you can't find what you're looking for, go ahead and type in a term in the search category and then see if you can kind of narrow it down to something that makes more sense to you. When you do put something in the search, you want to be as generic as possible and then use the categories to narrow it down. That's going to be the most helpful option for you.
Is it better to start with body parts such as foot or elbow, or like sprain?
It's better to start with the actual issue that's at hand. And so if you think it's a fracture type fracture, if it's a sprain type sprain, if it's pain type pain, you're going to do better off starting with the actual problem and then narrowing down the location and any associated complications or specificities related to it. Now, one issue that is true is once you get this far for a search that's been typed in, unfortunately, if you don't find what you're looking for here, you actually have to exit out of the ICD10 search tool to reset it and start from scratch. Again, another issue that eMDs is going to be working on in the future. But if you notice, can't really unselect sprain. Oh, it did let me go. Well, sometimes you can't unselect sprain when you do it. There are certain situations where you have to exit out.
So you would just exit out of the whole thing?
Yeah, you'd actually go ahead and click the exit out here and then start from scratch again. But in this case, we actually found what we wanted. Let's say it's the radiocollateral ligament. We're going to select that one, unselect there, and then we're going to go ahead and select next. And again, that's going to bring up our additional codes just to make sure that we don't have any foreign bodies. We hit save. Now we've got what we want. And so we're going to go ahead and hit the close button. And bada bing, bada bang. There we are. We've got codes on all three. We're going to hit save. And again, we're going to close this note. So the last one we're going to do today is well child checks, because that's got some specific things to go along with it. Again, you see the preventative counseling code is there. The well child exam is not coded yet, but it could be patient linked. And it's one of the rare situations where you may need to open up the ICD10 code, even if this one is already patient linked, because the code may be incorrect, as we're going to see here in a moment. So if you look under well child exam, what I want you guys to notice is there's actually several different options that are all appropriate given but for different circumstances. So if the baby's under 8 days old, you're going to select that one. If they're actually over 8 but under 28 days, there's an additional code that's not even on there going to select. If they're over 28 days, then you've got two options. You've got abnormal findings or normal findings, or with abnormal findings or without normal findings. And so any one of those could be the correct code. And if you think about it, you'll use this one for the first well child check visit, but when they come back for their 2-month visit, you might use it if they come back in, say, under 4 weeks, you're going to use the 28-day visit. But then you'll have to change it to the routine well child check if they're over 28 days. And so you may find yourself switching codes on that as the baby grows up. The other thing would be is if they're normal for the 2-month, 4-month visit, but you get to the 6-month visit and all of a sudden they're not growing like you would expect them to, you're going to change it to the code to read with abnormal findings. So generally we're going to use the one that's the routine child check without abnormal findings. But again, you need to be aware that you might need to open the ICD-9 specific coding tool just to get these selections. And I would say within a short period of time, that 28-day-old code is going to show up in there. Once somebody uses it the first time, it'll show up in there forever and ever. The other thing to keep in mind is that for well child checks, this Z23 is an encounter for immunization. So if you know the baby's getting immunizations that day, you're going to go ahead and select that one each and every time. If they are not going to get immunizations that day, then you want to go ahead and deselect it or delete it if it's pre-linked in the patient there.
It's okay to have 2 things selected.
Very much okay to have 2 things selected. I will say, and this is a confusing thing, is this other specified counseling does not belong. And so you don't need to use it. So you don't need to put other specified counseling under there. It's actually already under the preventative health counseling, and you don't need to use that one twice under 2 different diagnoses. Eventually, when eMDs allows us to edit this, we'll get that one out of there so it's less confusing for you. So just keep in mind that with the well child checks, you're going to need to know how old the baby is. You're going to need to know whether there are abnormal findings or normal findings. And then you're going to need to add in whether that encounter they're getting immunizations or not. For example, the 9-month visit, obviously you're not going to do that. You're going to deselect that as they go.
Okay.
All right. And that's easy. So guys, that's the quick review of ICD-10 coding and eMDs. 2-parter there, so got you a little bit of extra information. In the future, we're going to go over specific diagnoses and how to do an ICD-10. But if this format works, we're actually going to use it to learn more about eMDs and some of the little tricks and tips that we use to kind of help code things faster. And going forward, we'll use it to be able to learn some new tools that eMDs puts out even before they get to the point where we have a big meeting of professional staff. So hope you guys enjoyed the podcast. We'll see you next time.
Bye.
And I guess that's why